The island nobody talked about just became the most contested land on Earth. Greenland has a population of 56,000 people, smaller than most mid-sized cities. But right now, the United States, Russia, and China are all making aggressive moves to control this island. This is active, documented geopolitical warfare. The three most powerful nations on Earth are locked in a silent fight over a frozen territory most people cannot find on a map. The question is not why Greenland matters. The question is why it matters more than almost anywhere else on Earth. Greenland sits at the crossroads of everything that matters. Location is everything in geopolitics, and Greenland is positioned between North America, Europe, and the Arctic. It is not close to one major region. It is close to all of them, and that is what makes it a strategic choke point. Any nation that controls or influences Greenland gains a vantage point over Arctic shipping routes, North Atlantic military corridors, and access to some of the most resource-rich land on the planet. This single piece of geography gives Greenland power that has nothing to do with its population or economy. It is purely about where it sits on the map. The Gute Gap is the reason NATO loses sleep. There is a maritime corridor called the Gute Gap that stands for Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. This is the critical choke point connecting the Arctic Ocean to the North Atlantic. Every military movement between Russia's Northern Fleet and the open Atlantic passes through or near this gap. During the Cold War, this was one of the most heavily monitored naval corridors on Earth, and it still is. If Russia gains influence over Greenland, it gains leverage directly over this corridor, meaning the ability to threaten NATO's sea lines of communication. That is not a minor detail. That is a checkmate move. Russia already controls more Arctic territory than any other nation. Russia owns more than half of the entire Arctic coastline. The country has the world's largest icebreaker fleet, over 50 ships, including the only nuclear-powered icebreaker fleet on the planet. Moscow has reopened dozens of Soviet-era military bases along its northern coast. Russia's northern fleet on the Kola Peninsula includes over 30 submarines, many nuclear-powered and armed with cruise missiles. Russia does not need Greenland the way the United States does. What Russia needs is to make sure nobody else gets it first. If the US locks down Greenland, Russia's Arctic dominance gets contained. The Northern Sea Route is Russia's economic lifeline and China's golden ticket. Climate change is melting Arctic ice, opening a new shipping route along Russia's northern coast called the Northern Sea Route. This route cuts the distance between Europe and Asia dramatically compared to the Suez Canal. Russia views it as its own internal waterway and has been militarizing it aggressively. In 2024, Russia shipped 37.9 million tons of cargo through it, and Moscow's target is 80 million tons. China, under its Polar Silk Road initiative, has invested directly in Arctic infrastructure to use this corridor. Greenland sits at the western end, and whoever influences Greenland influences this trade route. Greenland is sitting on a mineral jackpot worth trillions. This is where the real money enters the conversation. Greenland holds an estimated 36 million tons of rare earth elements. The island contains occurrences of 25 out of 34 minerals the European Commission classifies as critical raw materials. The American Action Forum estimated the raw geological value of Greenland's known mineral resources could theoretically exceed $4 trillion. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates Greenland's offshore basins may hold up to 17.5 billion barrels of oil and 148 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. These are economy-changing numbers. Rare earth elements are the new oil, and China controls most of them. Rare earth elements are 17 specific metals critical for smartphones, electric vehicles, wind turbines, fighter jets, AI data centers, and nearly everything that runs modern technology. Right now, China controls approximately 70% of global rare earth mining and dominates the refining process even more completely. The United States, Europe, and every other major tech power is desperately looking for alternative sources, and Greenland is one of the biggest on Earth. Whoever secures access to Greenland's rare earth deposits gains a direct counter to China's stranglehold on the global supply chain. This is not about money. This is about technological independence. China has already been quietly investing in Greenland for over a decade. China is not a passive observer. Over the last 10 years, Chinese companies attempted to invest in Greenland's airports, an abandoned naval station, and a satellite ground station. A Chinese rare earth company called Shanghai Resources became the second largest shareholder in the Kvanefjeld rare earth mine project. Shanghai signed a 2018 agreement to lead processing and marketing of materials from that mine. Denmark blocked most of these moves under pressure from Washington, but the attempts reveal Beijing's strategy. China wants a foothold, processing agreements, and to extend its rare earth dominance to one of the last major untapped deposits outside its control. The United States has had a military base in Greenland since the Cold War. Patuffik Space Base, formerly known as Thule Air Base, sits in northwestern Greenland. It is the northernmost military installation the United States operates anywhere on Earth. The base provides early warning radar for incoming missiles, satellite surveillance, and is a critical node in NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command. The U.S. has maintained this base under agreements with Denmark since 1951. In June 2025, the Trump administration shifted Greenland from U.S. European Command to U.S. Northern Command, and that is a direct signal that Washington now views Greenland as part of a great power competition arena, not a relic of the Cold War. Trump did not create this fight. He escalated it. The idea of the U.S. purchasing Greenland is not new. President Truman formally offered to buy it from Denmark back in 1946. During Trump's first term in 2019, he revived the idea publicly, and Denmark and Greenland rejected it outright. But the strategic logic never went away. In January 2025, Trump returned to this with far more intensity, stating the U.S. would take Greenland one way or another. The 2025 U.S. National Security Strategy explicitly calls for American dominance in the Western Hemisphere, including Greenland. This is not improvisation. This is official policy. Russia and China are now running joint military operations near Greenland. In 2023, China's Coast Guard entered the Arctic for the first time in a joint patrol with Russia. Then, in 2024, Russian and Chinese forces conducted months of combined operations, including bomber patrols, naval exercises, and Coast Guard operations inside Alaska's Air Defense Identification Zone. The U.S. Department of Defense documented this expanding Arctic collaboration in an early 2025 report. These are not isolated incidents. This is a coordinated campaign to demonstrate that both nations can operate together in waters the United States has historically dominated alone. The Arctic Council, the body that was supposed to keep peace, is broken. The Arctic Council was the main body governing cooperation among Arctic nations. After Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, 7 out of 8 Arctic states immediately suspended participation. Russia was locked out entirely. Finland joined NATO in 2023, and Sweden followed in 2024. Russia is now surrounded by NATO members across its northern border, and this has not made Russia back down. It has made Russia more aggressive. The Arctic Council no longer functions, and there is no neutral forum left to resolve disputes over Greenland or any other Arctic territory. Greenland's own people are caught in the middle, and they are not happy about it. Greenland is a self-governing territory within the Kingdom of Denmark, with its own government and parliament. Greenland's prime minister publicly stated that annexation talk is unacceptable. Greenlandic leaders have said, "We are not Americans. We are not Danes. We are Greenlanders." The territory has long been pursuing economic independence and eventual sovereignty from Denmark. But right now, 3 superpowers are making strategic decisions about Greenland's future with minimal input from the 56,000 people who actually live there. That is what happens when a small territory sits on top of something the world desperately wants. Denmark is scrambling to hold its ground. Denmark is not standing still. In August 2025, Denmark summoned the U.S. diplomatic representative after reports of American covert influence operations inside Greenland. Denmark established a new Arctic Command headquarters in Nuuk and recently acquired F-35 fighter jets to strengthen Arctic defense. The Danish government has rallied European allies and is pushing for a larger NATO presence on the island. French President Macron visited Greenland in June 2025 as part of that effort. But Denmark is a small country trying to hold territory that three superpowers want access to, and the power imbalance is stark. The covert influence operation that blew up in 2025. Danish public broadcaster reported that at least 3 U.S. citizens with connections to President Trump were running a covert influence campaign inside Greenland. They identified which Greenlanders were sympathetic to US interests, built relationships with local politicians and business people, and worked to portray Denmark negatively in American media. Denmark called this unacceptable and summoned the U.S. diplomatic representative. This was not an allegation from a rival nation. This was confirmed by Danish media and triggered official diplomatic action. It reveals the operational investment the United States is willing to make to shift Greenland's political alignment. The mining reality is harder than the headlines suggest. Here is what the headlines leave out. Only 20% of Greenland is ice-free. Temperatures regularly drop below minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. There are no roads or railroads outside the cities. There are currently only 2 active mines on the entire island, and no rare earth mining has ever taken place in Greenland. The harsh Arctic conditions, the lack of infrastructure, and environmental regulations, including a 2021 law banning uranium exploration that effectively halted the largest rare earth project, make large-scale extraction enormously expensive. The minerals are there, but extracting them profitably is a completely different problem. China controls 98% of global gallium production. Gallium is a critical mineral found in Greenland. It is essential for semiconductors, consumer electronics, data centers, and quantum computing devices. China controls approximately 98% of global gallium supply and around 60% of global germanium, another critical mineral in Greenland essential for fiber optic communications. In 2023, China placed export controls on both minerals, using them as negotiating leverage against the United States. Greenland's deposits represent one of the few pathways for the West to reduce this dependency. The geopolitical stakes are not abstract. They are measured in supply chain control. The European Union is also making its move. The European Union opened an office in Nuuk in March 2024. Then in June 2025, the EU designated Greenland's Amitsoq graphite project as a strategic project under its Critical Raw Materials Act. In December 2025, Greenland granted a 30-year mining license for that deposit to a London-listed company backed by the European Raw Materials Alliance. Europe is not watching this fight from the sidelines. It is actively competing with the US and China for Greenland's resources, because the EU is currently 100% dependent on Chinese imports for heavy rare earth elements. Polar strike routes make Greenland a nuclear flashpoint. This is the detail that keeps defense planners awake at night. Polar routes, flight paths over the Arctic, are the shortest and most direct pathways for long-range nuclear strike systems, traveling from Eurasia toward North American targets. Greenland sits near the seam connecting these launch corridors to cities like Boston, New York, and Washington. Early warning systems at Patuxent Space Base exist specifically to detect incoming threats along these paths. If the United States loses influence over Greenland, it loses critical minutes of warning time in a nuclear scenario. Minutes matter when the entire response depends on detection speed. This is not going away. The race is accelerating. Every factor driving this competition is intensifying simultaneously. Arctic ice is melting faster, opening more routes and exposing more resources. China's rare earth dominance is tightening. Russia's military posture in the Arctic keeps expanding. The United States has made Greenland an explicit national security priority in official strategy documents. The European Union is locking in mining deals, and Greenland itself is moving toward independence, which will eventually reshape the entire political landscape. The fight over Greenland is not a headline from this week. It is the opening move in a competition that will define who controls the Arctic, and by extension who controls critical minerals, shipping routes, and military positioning for the next several decades. The island has 56,000 people. The stakes involve trillions of dollars, nuclear deterrence, and the balance of global power. That is why Russia, America, and China are all fighting over Greenland's land. Subscribe now. If you made it this far, you already know this channel delivers straight facts. Hit subscribe. You will not regret it.